To commemorate the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, folks gathering in Bangor's Pierce Park today to read the document. Grace Bradley was there.
A world in which human beings shall enjoy freedom of speech and belief and freedom from
It was created right after World War II. When the United Nations was formed, people from various countries around the world got together and said, we need a statement, we need a focus for how to address human rights. And so they put together the 30 articles in the preamble.
Not only does the demonstration serve as a celebration, but also as a call to action. After the public reading, the group descended on congressional offices to promote a human rights framework approach, specifically to the tragic events in Gaza, where organizers say the acknowledgments of human rights are failing both Israeli and Palestinian citizens.
I feel like our Congress and our government is way off the charts in terms of acknowledging anything about equality. We were the sole veto in the United Nations looking for a ceasefire at the Security Council.
So we want people just to look at a situation and say, if some of these human rights are being violated, this needs to stop. The U.S. as a government is focusing on military solutions to problems. A lot of individuals in this country believe that there are ways of resolving conflicts without using the barrel of a gun.
20 years ago, right this time, I was in Israel, Palestine, reading these declarations with Israeli soldiers at checkpoints. And I think what's happened in the last 20 years, because this conflict hasn't been resolved with any understanding, compassion, for another people's rights, human rights, things have become so much worse that we're really endangering the whole world.
Everybody deserves those human rights, no matter who they are.
Grace Bradley, WABI TV5 News, Bangor.